Have you ever fallen asleep to the chaotic sounds of Peter Griffin crashing through a wall or Stewie plotting world domination? Tonight we're diving deep into the bizarre, twisted, and surprisingly intricate world of Family Guy lore that's somehow become the perfect background noise for millions of viewers worldwide. From the hidden connections between episodes that span decades to the dark secrets lurking beneath Quahog's surface, this is your ultimate guide to the Family Guy universe that will either help you drift off to dreamland or keep you wide awake, questioning everything you thought you knew about America's most dysfunctional animated family. Family Guy has been on our screens for over 2 decades now, and what started as a simple animated sitcom has evolved into something far more complex and layered than most people realize. Tonight we're going to explore the deep lore, the recurring mysteries, the character backstories that only dedicated fans know about, and all the subtle details that make this show a fascinating rabbit hole to fall down as you're trying to fall asleep. Let's start with the Griffin family themselves, because there's so much more to these characters than meets the eye. Peter Griffin isn't just a bumbling father figure. His backstory reveals a man shaped by abandonment, neglect, and a desperate need for acceptance that manifests in increasingly destructive ways. We learn throughout the series that Peter was adopted, never knowing his real father until much later in the show's run. This abandonment issue explains so much about his behavior, his need to be the center of attention, and his often childlike approach to solving problems. But here's where it gets interesting for our sleepy exploration. Peter's job history reads like a fever dream. He's worked at a toy factory, been a fisherman, worked at a brewery, become a bodyguard, tried his hand at being a country music star, worked as a private investigator, and somehow ended up back at the brewery multiple times. Each job change represents a different phase of the show's evolution, and if you're watching chronologically as you fall asleep, you can actually track the show's tonal shifts through Peter's career moves. Lois Griffin presents an even more fascinating character study for our nighttime viewing. She comes from the wealthy Pewterschmidt family, which immediately sets up this class conflict that runs throughout the entire series. Her father, Carter Pewterschmidt, represents old money, conservative values, and everything that Peter both despises and desperately wants to be accepted by. Lois chose Peter over her privileged background, but this choice haunts their relationship in subtle ways that become more apparent when you're watching with sleepy, unfocused attention. The really interesting lore element here is how Lois's musical background keeps surfacing throughout the series. She's classically trained, she's performed professionally, and there are hints that she gave up a potentially successful career to become a housewife and mother. These musical moments in the show often serve as brief respites from the chaos, making them perfect for viewers who are using the show to wind down. Now let's talk about Meg, because her character arc is actually one of the most complex and disturbing elements of the Family Guy universe. What starts as typical teenage awkwardness evolves into something much darker. The family's treatment of Meg goes beyond normal sibling rivalry or parental frustration. It becomes a systematic emotional abuse that the show initially played for laughs, but gradually reveals as genuinely harmful. The lore around Meg includes several episodes that suggest she's actually the most mentally stable and capable member of the family, which makes her treatment even more tragic. She's shown to be intelligent, talented, and capable of genuine empathy, qualities that the rest of the family either ignores or actively punishes. For viewers drifting off to sleep, Meg's storylines often provide a strange sort of comfort because they're usually quieter and more introspective than the main family chaos. Chris Griffin's character development follows a different trajectory entirely. While he's often dismissed as the dumb kid, the show's lore reveals that Chris has artistic talent, musical ability, and emotional intelligence that surpasses most of his family members. His relationship with his father is complicated by Peter's own insecurities about masculinity and success. Chris represents the possibility of breaking the cycle of dysfunction, which gives his character an underlying hopefulness that works well for bedtime viewing. But let's dive into the real star of Family Guy's complex lore, Stewie Griffin. This character has undergone one of the most dramatic evolutionary arcs in television history. He started as a genuinely evil baby bent on world domination and matricide, but gradually transformed into a complex character dealing with identity, sexuality, and belonging. The show never explicitly addresses this transformation, which creates this fascinating ambiguity about whether Stewie actually changed or whether we're just seeing different aspects of his personality. The time travel episodes featuring Stewie create some of the most intricate lore in the entire series. His future selves, his various timelines, and his technological capabilities suggest a level of intelligence and capability that extends far beyond what we see in regular episodes. These time travel storylines often involve quieter, more contemplative moments that are perfect for viewers who are trying to relax. Stewie's relationship with Brian creates another layer of lore that's perfect for our sleepy exploration. Their friendship transcends the typical pet-owner relationship and becomes something closer to intellectual partnership. They travel together, solve problems together, and engage in philosophical discussions that often serve as the show's more thoughtful moments. Their dynamic provides a consistent emotional anchor throughout the series' more chaotic elements. Speaking of Brian, his character lore is incredibly rich and often overlooked. He's not just a talking dog, he's a failed writer, a recovering alcoholic, a liberal intellectual, and someone struggling with depression and self-worth issues. His various romantic relationships throughout the series reveal someone desperately seeking validation and connection. His death and resurrection in later seasons created one of the most emotionally impactful storylines in the show's history, demonstrating how attached viewers had become to his character. The setting of Quahog itself deserves exploration in our lore deep dive. This fictional Rhode Island town has its own mythology, complete with local celebrities, recurring businesses, and a distinct culture. The Drunken Clam serves as a central gathering place where much of the show's male bonding and philosophical discussions occur. Mort Goldman's pharmacy, the local news station, and various other businesses create a sense of continuity and community that grounds the more absurd elements of the show. Cleveland's departure and return to the series creates interesting lore implications. His time in Virginia with his own spin-off show exists in the same universe, and references to his experiences there occasionally surface in Family Guy episodes. This interconnected universe concept adds depth for viewers who are familiar with both shows. Quagmire's character provides some of the darkest lore in the entire series. While often played for laughs, his behavior patterns suggest serious psychological issues and criminal tendencies. The show occasionally hints at a more complex backstory involving his father's gender transition, his military service, and his dysfunctional relationship patterns. These darker elements create an interesting contrast with his seemingly cheerful demeanor. Joe Swanson's backstory as a disabled police officer adds another layer of complexity to the Quahog community. His accident, his marriage to Bonnie, and his struggle to maintain his sense of purpose and masculinity after becoming paralyzed provide some of the show's more serious emotional content. His friendship with Peter, Cleveland, and Quagmire often explores themes of loyalty, acceptance, and adaptation that work well for contemplative viewing. The show's cutaway gags, while seemingly random, actually create their own form of lore through recurring characters and situations. Conway Twitty appearances, the various historical figures Peter claims to have interacted with, and the recurring joke characters all contribute to the show's internal mythology. These cutaways often provide brief mental breaks that can be soothing for viewers trying to wind down. Family Guy's approach to continuity is deliberately loose, which actually makes it perfect for casual viewing. Unlike serialized dramas that require intense attention to plot details, Family Guy episodes can be enjoyed independently while still rewarding longtime viewers with references and callbacks. This makes it ideal for background viewing or for times when you're not paying complete attention. The show's musical numbers deserve special mention in our lore exploration. From Conway Twitty performances to elaborate Broadway-style productions, these musical interludes often serve as the show's most memorable and emotionally resonant moments. They break up the rapid-fire joke delivery and provide opportunities for character development and emotional expression. The various holiday episodes throughout the series create their own seasonal lore. Christmas episodes often explore themes of family, tradition, and redemption. Halloween episodes venture into horror and supernatural territory. These special episodes often feature higher production values and more elaborate storytelling that reward dedicated viewing. The show's treatment of religion, politics, and social issues creates ongoing lore threads that reflect changing social attitudes over the show's long run. Early episodes approach these topics differently than later ones, creating an interesting timeline of cultural evolution that can be tracked through the series' progression. Guest appearances and celebrity encounters in Family Guy often become part of the show's lore through recurring references and callbacks. These celebrity interactions sometimes extend beyond single episodes, creating ongoing relationships and references that reward longtime viewers. The various alternate reality and parallel universe episodes explore different versions of the Griffin family and Quahog community. These episodes often reveal character depths and relationship dynamics that aren't apparent in regular episodes. They also provide opportunities to explore what-if scenarios that add complexity to our understanding of the main characters. Family Guy's animation style evolution tells its own story about the show's development and budget changes over time. Early episodes have a distinctly different look and feel compared to more recent ones. This visual evolution creates a subtle timeline that longtime viewers can use to place episodes chronologically, even without checking air dates. The show's relationship with Fox Network, including its cancellation and resurrection, becomes part of its own metalore. Episodes that reference these real-world events blur the line between fiction and reality in ways that add extra layers for dedicated fans to discover and contemplate. As we wind down our exploration of Family Guy's rich lore landscape, it's worth noting that this depth and complexity is part of what makes the show so suitable for repeated viewing and background watching. There's always another layer to discover, another connection to make, another character detail to notice. Whether you're actively watching or letting it play, while you drift off to sleep, Family Guy's universe provides a consistent, familiar, and surprisingly deep world to explore. The beauty of Family Guy lore for bedtime viewing lies in its perfect balance of familiarity and discovery. You can watch episodes you've seen dozens of times and still notice new details, catch references you missed before, or simply let the familiar voices and situations wash over you as you relax. The show's episodic nature means you won't lose important plot threads if you fall asleep mid-episode, but its rich lore rewards those moments when you find yourself unexpectedly engaged and alert. Sweet dreams, and remember that somewhere in Quahog, Peter Griffin is probably about to do something that will somehow make perfect sense within the wonderfully chaotic universe that has been entertaining us for over 2 decades. You know that feeling when you're lying in bed scrolling through endless videos trying to find something that'll help you drift off to sleep? Most people go for rain sounds or meditation videos, but there's this weird corner of the internet that's discovered something completely unexpected: Family Guy lore videos. And honestly, it makes perfect sense once you think about it. Picture this: Peter Griffin's bumbling voice rambling about some ridiculous backstory while you slowly fade into dreamland. It's like having that one friend who tells really long, meandering stories that somehow become the perfect background noise for sleep. But here's the thing: Family Guy isn't just random jokes and cutaway gags. There's actually this incredibly deep, twisted universe hiding beneath all the chaos, and when you start exploring it at bedtime, something magical happens. Tonight, we're diving into the strangest, most soothing rabbit hole on YouTube. We're talking about Family Guy lore that's specifically designed to help you sleep. And trust me, by the end of this journey, you'll understand why millions of people are choosing Stewie's time travel adventures over counting sheep. Let's start with why this works so well. Your brain needs something engaging enough to distract from racing thoughts, but not so stimulating that it keeps you awake. Family Guy lore hits this sweet spot perfectly. The familiar voices create a sense of comfort, like having old friends nearby. The storylines are complex enough to occupy your mind, but delivered in that laid-back, conversational tone that naturally slows your heart rate. The beauty of Family Guy as sleep content lies in its structure. Unlike other shows that build tension toward climactic moments, Family Guy operates on this weird, episodic flow where nothing is too serious or urgent. Even when Peter is destroying the town or Stewie is plotting world domination, there's this underlying absurdity that signals to your brain that everything is okay. It's chaos, but comfortable chaos. One of the most popular sleep topics is Stewie's time travel timeline. Now, if you've watched the show casually, you might think Stewie's time adventures are just random episodes. But when you dig deeper, there's this incredibly complex web of cause and effect that spans decades. Stewie has literally shaped the Griffin family history in ways most viewers never realize. Think about it. In one timeline, Stewie prevents his own birth, which creates this paradox where he exists but shouldn't. In another, he saves his father's life, completely altering the family dynamic. These aren't just throwaway episodes. They're building blocks of an intricate multiverse where every action ripples through time. And when someone narrates this in a gentle, sleepy voice while you're tucked in bed, it becomes this dreamy exploration of cause and effect that naturally leads your mind into sleep. The time travel lore gets even more interesting when you consider Stewie's relationship with Brian. Their adventures through different eras reveal hidden layers of both characters. Brian isn't just the family dog who talks. He's this tortured intellectual who's lived through multiple timelines, sometimes remembering previous versions of events, sometimes completely oblivious. The complexity of their friendship across different realities becomes this beautiful, melancholy meditation on friendship and loyalty. What makes this perfect for sleep is how these time travel stories often end with everything returning to normal, or at least a version of normal. There's no real stakes because the show's format demands that the status quo be maintained. Your subconscious picks up on this pattern and relaxes, knowing that no matter how wild the adventure gets, the Griffin family will be okay by morning. Another incredibly soothing topic is the hidden depth of Peter Griffin's character. On the surface, he's just this obnoxious, immature father figure. But when you start examining his backstory, there's surprising emotional complexity. Peter's relationship with his own father, Francis, reveals layers of abandonment issues and the desperate need for approval that drives much of his behavior. The Catholic guilt that shapes Peter's worldview, his struggles with identity, his genuine love for his family despite constantly endangering them, all of this creates this rich psychological portrait. When narrated as bedtime content, Peter's flaws become almost endearing. He's not a bad person, he's just deeply human in the most ridiculous possible way. The show has quietly built this mythology around Peter's various jobs and failures. From working at the brewery to his brief stint as a country music star, each career represents a different aspect of the American dream gone wrong. But instead of being depressing, it's oddly comforting. Peter always bounces back, always finds something new to be enthusiastic about. His resilience becomes this gentle reminder that failure isn't permanent, that there's always another chance to mess things up in new and interesting ways. Lois Griffin's background provides another rich vein of sleep-friendly lore. Her wealthy upbringing, her musical talents, her complicated relationship with her parents, all of this creates this fascinating contrast with her current life. She chose chaos over comfort, love over luxury. When explored in that drowsy, contemplative tone that characterizes good sleep content, Lois becomes this complex figure who represents the compromises we all make for love. The show has revealed that Lois has this incredibly patient, almost saint-like quality that allows her to tolerate Peter's behavior. But occasionally, we see cracks in this facade, moments where her true feelings break through. These glimpses of Lois's inner life become fascinating character studies when presented as gentle bedtime analysis. Meg Griffin represents something even more interesting in the show's mythology. She's the perpetual outsider, the family member who never quite fits in. But when you examine her character closely, she's often the most sensible person in the room. Her isolation isn't really about her being unlikable. It's about her being different, more grounded than the rest of her chaotic family. The psychological dynamics of how the Griffin family treats Meg reveal uncomfortable truths about family structures and social hierarchies. But when explored as sleep content, these observations become philosophical musings rather than harsh critiques. Meg's resilience in the face of constant rejection becomes almost inspiring, a quiet testament to the strength of people who don't fit conventional molds. Chris Griffin's journey through adolescence provides another layer of gentle complexity. His artistic talents, his kind heart, his struggles with self-image, all of this unfolds against the backdrop of typical teenage challenges, amplified by his family's dysfunction. Chris represents hope in the Griffin universe, the possibility that the next generation might break free from destructive patterns. The show has developed this subtle running theme about Chris's potential. He's genuinely talented, genuinely caring, but constantly undermined by his environment. When narrated as bedtime content, Chris's story becomes this quiet meditation on nurture versus nature, on how children can maintain their essential goodness despite chaotic circumstances. Brian Griffin deserves special attention because he's arguably the most complex character in the entire series. He's an intellectual trapped in a dog's body, an artist struggling with mediocrity, a liberal idealist living in a conservative household. His pretensions and failures make him simultaneously the most relatable and most frustrating character. Brian's writing career, his romantic relationships, his drinking problem, his philosophical debates with Stewie, all of this creates this rich tapestry of middle-aged disappointment wrapped in surreal comedy. When presented as sleep content, Brian's struggles become universal human experiences filtered through the lens of absurdity. The relationship between Brian and Stewie forms the emotional core of many episodes, and their dynamic has evolved significantly over the show's long run. Early episodes portrayed them as adversaries, but they've developed into this unusual friendship between two intellectuals who understand each other's isolation within the Griffin household. Their conversations, whether they're traveling through time or just sitting in the living room, often touch on profound themes of mortality, purpose, and connection. When these moments are compiled and narrated as bedtime content, they become these surprisingly deep philosophical discussions that naturally lead the mind toward contemplative rest. The supporting characters in Family Guy have developed their own rich backstories that provide endless material for sleep-friendly content. Glenn Quagmire, despite his obvious character flaws, has this complex history as a pilot and adventurer. His relationship with his father, his military service, his various romantic entanglements, all of this creates this surprisingly detailed character study. Cleveland Brown's departure and return to the show created interesting continuity questions that lore enthusiasts love to explore. The dynamics of the friend group, how relationships change over time, how people grow apart and come back together, these themes resonate on a deeper level when explored in that gentle, bedtime storytelling style. Joe Swanson's backstory as a police officer and his adjustment to life in a wheelchair provides material for surprisingly touching character exploration. His determination, his relationship with his family, his role as the moral center of Peter's friend group, all of this unfolds into rich character development that works beautifully as sleep content. The world building in Family Guy extends beyond the main characters to include the town of Quahog itself, the recurring locations, the background characters who appear across multiple episodes, the local politics and social dynamics. All of this creates a lived-in universe that feels surprisingly real despite its cartoon absurdity. The show has developed this consistent internal logic about how Quahog operates, from the local government to the business community to the social hierarchies. When explored as lore content, these details create this comforting sense of a complete world where everything has its place, even if that place is completely ridiculous. Family Guy's relationship with pop culture provides another fascinating avenue for sleep-friendly exploration. The show's countless references and parodies create this massive web of connections to movies, TV shows, music, and historical events. Tracing these references becomes like a gentle intellectual exercise that occupies the mind without overstimulating it. The cultural commentary embedded in these references often reveals surprising insight about American society, entertainment, and human nature. When presented as bedtime analysis, these observations become thoughtful cultural criticism delivered in the most relaxed possible format. The show's approach to continuity creates interesting puzzles for lore enthusiasts. Some episodes clearly exist in the same universe, building on previous events and character development. Others seem to exist in isolation, resetting everything back to a baseline. Understanding which episodes connect and which stand alone becomes this gentle mental exercise, perfect for bedtime. This flexible approach to continuity actually enhances the show's value as sleep content. Unlike serialized dramas where missing details might leave you confused, Family Guy's episodic nature means you can drift in and out of consciousness without losing the thread of what's happening. The animation style and visual, Storytelling and Family Guy contribute to its effectiveness as sleep content. The character designs are simple and comforting. The color palette is warm and familiar, and the pacing of visual jokes follows predictable patterns. Your brain learns to anticipate the rhythm of the show, which naturally promotes relaxation. The voice acting deserves special mention because the performers have developed these characters over decades. The familiarity of these voices creates an immediate sense of comfort and security. Seth MacFarlane's multiple character voices, Alex Borstein as Lois, Mila Kunis as Meg, each voice becomes like a comfortable presence in your bedroom. The musical elements in Family Guy add another layer of sleep-friendly content. The show frequently features elaborate musical numbers that range from Broadway-style productions to simple character songs. These musical interludes often reveal character depths and emotions that regular dialogue might not capture. When compiled as sleep content, these musical moments become like gentle lullabies that showcase different aspects of the characters' personalities. Conway Twitty performances, Stewie's show tunes, Peter's various musical adventures, all of this creates a diverse soundtrack for drifting off to sleep. The show's exploration of family dynamics provides universal themes that resonate regardless of the absurd context. The Griffin family, despite their dysfunction, genuinely cares about each other. Their conflicts and reconciliations follow familiar patterns that most viewers can relate to from their own family experiences. When examined as bedtime content, these family relationships become comforting reminders of the complexity and resilience of human connections. Even when Peter does something incredibly selfish or Stewie plots against his mother, the underlying love and loyalty always reassert themselves. The meta-humor in Family Guy creates another interesting layer for lore exploration. The show frequently acknowledges its own existence as a television program, breaking the fourth wall and commenting on its own production. These moments create this playful relationship between the show and its audience that enhances its value as comfort viewing. Understanding the real-world context behind certain episodes and jokes adds depth to the viewing experience without requiring intense concentration. The show's commentary on television, animation, and entertainment industry becomes gentle insider knowledge that enhances appreciation without demanding active analysis. The evolution of Family Guy over its many seasons provides rich material for comparative analysis. Early episodes had different character dynamics, different humor styles, and different production values. Tracing how the show has changed and developed becomes like following the growth of old friends. This long-term perspective on the series creates a sense of history and continuity that enhances its comfort value. You're not just watching random episodes. You're participating in this ongoing story that has unfolded over decades of real time. The fan community around Family Guy has developed its own theories and interpretations that add layers of meaning to seemingly simple episodes. These fan theories become part of the show's extended lore, creating additional content for exploration and discussion. When presented as bedtime content, these fan interpretations and theories become like bedtime stories shared among friends. They're speculative and playful rather than definitive, which makes them perfect for that drowsy state between wakefulness and sleep. The cultural impact of Family Guy extends beyond entertainment into social commentary and cultural criticism. The show has influenced animation, humor, and television production in measurable ways. Understanding this broader impact adds depth to individual episodes without requiring intense focus. This cultural context becomes another gentle layer of analysis that enhances the viewing experience. You're not just watching cartoons, you're experiencing a significant piece of contemporary American culture that has shaped entertainment and comedy. The merchandising and spin-off content around Family Guy creates additional universe expansion that lore enthusiasts love to explore. Video games, books, merchandise, and related media all contribute to the overall Griffin family mythology. These extensions of the core show become like supplementary reading that enhances understanding without being essential. They're bonus content that rewards dedicated fans while remaining accessible to casual viewers. So there you have it, the surprisingly deep and genuinely soothing world of Family Guy lore designed specifically for sleep. What started as a simple animated comedy has evolved into this rich, complex universe filled with character development, cultural commentary, and surprisingly profound themes about family, friendship, and human nature. The next time you're lying awake at 3 in the morning, scrolling through endless content options, remember that sometimes the most unexpected choices make the best bedtime companions. Peter Griffin's chaotic adventures and Stewie's time travel paradoxes might just be exactly what your brain needs to finally relax and drift off into peaceful sleep. Sweet dreams. And remember, in the multiverse of Family Guy, everything always works out in the end, which is exactly the kind of reassurance we all need before closing our eyes for the night. What if I told you that the chaotic world of Quahog, Rhode Island, holds some of the most intricate storytelling mysteries hidden in plain sight? Tonight, we're diving deep into the sprawling universe of Family Guy, uncovering the hidden lore, forgotten storylines, and interconnected mysteries that make this animated sitcom far more complex than most people realize. So get comfortable, dim those lights, and let me take you on a gentle journey through the surprisingly rich mythology of the Griffin family and their bizarre little town. Let's start with something that might surprise you. Family Guy isn't just a collection of random cutaway gags and crude humor. Beneath all the chaos lies a carefully constructed universe with its own internal logic, recurring themes, and surprisingly deep character development that spans over 2 decades of storytelling. The show has created an entire ecosystem of characters, locations, and running narratives that interweave in ways that become apparent only when you step back and look at the bigger picture. Consider the Griffin family home itself. That modest 2-story house at 31 Spooner Street has witnessed countless adventures, but it's also a character in its own right. The house has its own history, its own secrets, and its own role in the family's story. We've seen glimpses of its past through various episodes, learning about previous owners and the strange events that have occurred within its walls. The basement has served as everything from a secret laboratory to a tornado shelter, while the attic holds forgotten memories and mysterious artifacts from the family's past. Peter Griffin, the family patriarch, represents something far more complex than the typical bumbling father figure. His character arc across hundreds of episodes reveals a man struggling with responsibility, identity, and his place in the world. His various jobs throughout the series aren't just random plot devices, they're explorations of the American, working-class experience. From his time at the toy factory, to his stint as a fisherman, from his brief career as a bodyguard, to his adventures in television production. Peter's employment history tells a story about economic uncertainty and the changing nature of work in modern America. The relationship between Peter and his father-in-law, Carter Pewterschmidt, opens up entire storylines about class, wealth, and family dynamics. Carter represents old money, established power, and traditional values, while Peter embodies working-class sensibilities and anti-establishment attitudes. Their ongoing conflict reflects broader cultural tensions about privilege, success, and what it means to be a man in contemporary society. The episodes focusing on their relationship often reveal deeper truths about both characters, showing us sides of Peter we rarely see, and humanizing Carter beyond his role as the wealthy antagonist. Lois Griffin's character development represents one of the show's most subtle long-term storytelling achievements. Initially presented as the patient, long-suffering wife, Lois has evolved into a complex character with her own ambitions, frustrations, and moral complexities. Her musical background, her brief career as a model, her struggles with motherhood, and her occasional dark turns all contribute to a character portrait that's far richer than it appears on the surface. The episodes that focus on Lois often explore themes of unfulfilled potential, the sacrifices women make for family, and the tension between personal desires and social expectations. The children of the Griffin family each represent different aspects of growing up in modern America. Meg's role as the family scapegoat initially seems cruel, but viewed through a longer lens, her character arc becomes a meditation on adolescence, social acceptance, and finding one's place in the world. Her various attempts to fit in, her brief moments of triumph, and her resilience in the face of constant rejection tell a story about teenage life that's both exaggerated and surprisingly authentic. The episodes where Meg finally stands up for herself or finds temporary happiness hit differently when you understand the full context of her journey. Chris Griffin's character explores themes of masculinity, creativity, and coming of age. His artistic talents, his awkward social interactions, and his relationship with his father create a narrative about growing up different in a world that values conformity. The episodes that focus on Chris often deal with sensitive topics like bullying, self-expression, and the pressure to live up to expectations. His friendship with Herbert, the elderly neighbor, creates uncomfortable comedy, but also touches on themes of loneliness and the generation gap. Then there's Stewie Griffin, perhaps the most complex character in the entire series. His evolution from would-be world conqueror to sophisticated intellectual represents one of the most significant character developments in animated television. Stewie's relationship with Brian, his adventures through time and space, and his gradual coming to terms with his own identity create storylines that are simultaneously hilarious and surprisingly moving. The episodes that focus on Stewie often push the boundaries of what's possible in the Family Guy universe, introducing science fiction elements, philosophical discussions, and emotional depth that contrasts sharply with the show's typical tone. Brian Griffin serves as the show's moral center and intellectual conscience, but he's also deeply flawed in ways that make him more human than many actual human characters. His struggles with alcoholism, his pretentious intellectual posturing, his complicated romantic relationships, and his role as the family's voice of reason create a character who's simultaneously admirable and infuriating. The episodes that explore Brian's background, his relationship with his own identity as a talking dog, and his place in human society often serve as vehicles for social commentary and philosophical exploration. The town of Quahog itself is a character worthy of deep exploration. This fictional Rhode Island community has its own ecosystem of recurring characters, local institutions, and cultural traditions. The Drunken Clam serves as more than just Peter's favorite bar. It's a gathering place where working-class philosophy gets hashed out over beer and conversation. Jerome, the bartender, represents stability and wisdom in a world of chaos. The regular patrons each have their own stories and perspectives that contribute to the show's exploration of community and belonging. Quahog's local government, represented by Mayor Adam West, creates storylines that satirize American politics while also celebrating the absurdity of civic life. Mayor West's bizarre policies, his strange obsessions, and his genuine care for his constituents create a character who's simultaneously incompetent and oddly effective. The episodes dealing with local politics often reveal truths about democracy, leadership, and the relationship between citizens and their government. The show's approach to religion and spirituality, primarily explored through the Griffin family's relationship with their local church and various religious figures, creates ongoing narratives about faith, morality, and community. These storylines often challenge both religious orthodoxy and secular assumptions, creating space for nuanced discussions about belief and practice in modern American life. Family Guy's use of cutaway gags isn't just random humor, it's a storytelling technique that allows the show to explore ideas and scenarios that wouldn't fit into the main narrative. These brief vignettes often comment on historical events, pop culture phenomena, and social issues in ways that are both entertaining and insightful. The cumulative effect of hundreds of these cutaways creates a comprehensive commentary on American culture and society. The show's relationship with popular culture goes beyond simple parody. The various celebrity appearances, pop culture references, and media satires create a running commentary on fame, entertainment, and the role of media in modern life. Episodes that focus on Peter's brief brush with celebrity or Brian's attempts at literary fame explore themes about success, authenticity, and the price of public recognition. The recurring characters in Family Guy's universe each contribute to the show's exploration of different aspects of American life. Glenn Quagmire represents unchecked masculinity and sexual liberation, but episodes that delve deeper into his character reveal a more complex individual struggling with his own demons and desires. Cleveland Brown's friendship with Peter and his eventual move to his own spin-off series created storylines about race, friendship, and community that the show handled with surprising sensitivity. The show's treatment of disability, primarily through the character of Joe Swanson, creates ongoing narratives about resilience, adaptation, and the challenges faced by people with disabilities in American society. Joe's character development over the series shows him as a fully realized individual whose disability is just one aspect of his identity, not its defining characteristic. Family Guy's exploration of family dynamics extends beyond the immediate Griffin household to include the extended family members who appear throughout the series. Peter's relationship with his father Mickey, Lois's complex feelings about her parents, and the various relatives who drift in and out of episodes create a broader picture of how families function, dysfunction, and evolve over time. The show's handling of death and mortality, from the controversial killing and resurrection of Brian to the various deaths of minor characters throughout the series, creates ongoing meditations on loss, grief, and the meaning of life. These episodes often reveal the deep emotional connections between characters that might not be apparent in more comedic episodes. The science fiction elements that creep into Family Guy through Stewie's inventions and time travel adventures create opportunities for the show to explore philosophical questions about destiny, free will, and the nature of reality. The episodes dealing with alternate timelines and parallel universes suggest that the Family Guy universe is far more complex and interconnected than it initially appears. The show's treatment of education, primarily through the various school episodes and Chris and Meg's academic experiences, creates commentary on the American educational system, social hierarchies among young people, and the challenges of growing up in contemporary society. These storylines often reveal the ways that institutional structures both support and fail young people. Family Guy's exploration of work and economic life through Peter's various jobs and the family's financial struggles creates ongoing commentary about class, opportunity, and the American dream. The episodes that focus on economic hardship often reveal the ways that financial stress affects family relationships and individual well-being. The show's approach to mental health, explored through various characters' psychological struggles and Brian's role as unofficial family therapist, creates space for discussions about depression, anxiety, and the importance of mental health care. These storylines often handle serious topics with both humor and genuine sensitivity. As we wrap up this journey through the hidden depths of Family Guy's universe, it's worth noting that this exploration only scratches the surface of the rich storytelling possibilities contained within this seemingly simple animated comedy. The show's ability to balance crude humor with genuine emotional depth, social commentary with pure entertainment, and chaos with carefully constructed narrative arcs makes it a unique achievement in television comedy. The next time you watch an episode of Family Guy, try looking beyond the surface humor to see the deeper stories being told. Notice how character relationships evolve over time, how running gags develop new meanings in different contexts, and how the show uses its absurdist elements to explore very real human experiences and social issues. Sweet dreams, and remember that sometimes the most profound truths are hidden in the most unexpected places, even in the chaotic world of Quahog, Rhode Island. What if I told you that underneath all the random cutaway gags and crude humor, Family Guy has been building one of the most intricate and bizarre mythologies in television history? Tonight, we're diving deep into the hidden lore that connects everything from Stewie's time travel adventures to the cosmic horror lurking beneath Quahog's seemingly normal surface. Get comfortable, because this journey through the Griffin family's secret universe is going to be a wild ride that might just change how you see every episode forever. Let's start with something that seems innocent enough, but opens up an entire rabbit hole of implications. Have you ever noticed that Stewie Griffin isn't just a baby with advanced intelligence? He's actually a being that exists outside the normal flow of time itself. Throughout the series, we've seen him build time machines, travel to alternate dimensions, and even meet future versions of himself. But here's where it gets interesting. In several episodes, Stewie demonstrates knowledge of events that haven't happened yet, and sometimes he seems to be aware that he's in a television show. This isn't just random comedy writing. There's a consistent pattern that suggests Stewie might be some kind of temporal entity that chose to inhabit the body of a baby for reasons we're only beginning to understand. Think about it. He's built multiple time machines from scratch using household items. He's created clones, developed advanced weaponry, and even constructed interdimensional portals. No normal baby, no matter how intelligent, could accomplish these things without some kind of supernatural assistance or inherent cosmic power. The evidence becomes even more compelling when you consider his relationship with Brian. Unlike other family members who seem to understand Stewie only sporadically, Brian consistently communicates with him on an adult level. But Brian isn't just any dog. He's a talking dog who drives cars, writes novels, and has existential crises about the nature of reality. The fact that these two characters can communicate perfectly suggests they might both be operating on a different plane of existence than the rest of the family. Speaking of Brian, let's explore his own mysterious origins. He was found as a stray by the Griffin family, but his background remains largely unexplained. He drinks alcohol, smokes cigarettes, and engages in romantic relationships with humans. In several episodes, we've seen him question his own nature and struggle with the absurdity of being a talking dog in a world where most animals don't speak. This existential awareness might be the key to understanding his true nature. There's a theory that Brian represents a bridge between the normal world and the supernatural elements that permeate Quahog. He's intelligent enough to recognize the strangeness around him, but trapped in a form that prevents him from fully participating in human society. His conversations with Stewie often touch on philosophical and scientific concepts that suggest both characters are aware of deeper truths about their reality. Now let's talk about Peter Griffin himself, because beneath his bumbling exterior lies something far more complex. Peter has survived explosions, falls from incredible heights, and injuries that should have killed him dozens of times over. He's also demonstrated superhuman strength in various episodes, lifting cars and fighting characters with obvious supernatural abilities. But more importantly, Peter seems to be a nexus point for the weird events that happen in Quahog. Everywhere Peter goes, reality seems to bend slightly. Characters break into musical numbers for no reason. People appear and disappear without explanation. The laws of physics become suggestions rather than rules. It's as if Peter's presence weakens the barriers between the normal world and something much stranger. This could explain why the Griffin family attracts so many bizarre situations and supernatural encounters. Consider the episode where Peter gains psychic powers, or the times he's been visited by supernatural entities. These aren't isolated incidents, but part of a larger pattern that suggests Peter might be unknowingly channeling some kind of cosmic energy. His simple-minded nature could be a protective mechanism that prevents him from fully comprehending his own power, because if Peter ever became truly aware of his abilities, the consequences could be catastrophic. Lois Griffin presents her own mysteries. On the surface, she's the long-suffering wife trying to keep her chaotic family together. But Lois has her own dark secrets and hidden depths. She comes from a wealthy family with connections that extend far beyond what we see on screen. Her father, Carter Pewterschmidt, isn't just rich. He's connected to military-industrial complexes and shadowy organizations that operate behind the scenes. Throughout the series, Lois has demonstrated skills and knowledge that suggest extensive training in areas most housewives would never encounter. She's fluent in multiple languages, skilled in combat, and has connections to criminal organizations. In several episodes, she's shown leading double lives that involve activities ranging from boxing to working with international intelligence agencies. These aren't random plot devices, but hints at a much larger story about who Lois really is and why she ended up with the Griffin family. There's also the question of how Lois manages to hold the family together despite the constant chaos. She seems to have an almost supernatural ability to adapt to whatever insane situation her family creates. Whether it's dealing with Stewie's death rays or Peter's latest scheme to destroy the neighborhood, Lois always finds a way to restore some semblance of normalcy. This suggests she might be operating with knowledge or abilities that go beyond what we see on the surface. The town of Quahog itself is a character in this strange mythology. It's supposedly a normal Rhode Island community, but the events that occur there on a regular basis defy all logic. The town has been destroyed and rebuilt multiple times. Its residents include everything from former Nazis to aliens to interdimensional beings. The mayor is a corrupt official who openly admits to criminal activities, yet somehow the town continues to function. What's really interesting is how quickly the residents of Quahog accept supernatural events. When a chicken fights Peter through half the town, destroying buildings and causing massive property damage, everyone just goes back to their normal lives afterward. When time travel events create paradoxes that should fundamentally alter reality, the town adapts without question. This suggests that Quahog exists in a state of flexible reality where the impossible becomes routine. The recurring locations in Quahog also hint at deeper mysteries. The Drunken Clam isn't just a bar. It's a place where characters regularly receive prophetic dreams and encounter supernatural entities. Quahog Elementary School has been the site of numerous reality-bending events. Even the Griffin house itself seems to exist partially outside normal space and time, with rooms that appear and disappear and basement areas that extend far beyond what the exterior structures should allow. Let's dive deeper into the show's treatment of death and resurrection, because Family Guy has a very loose relationship with mortality that suggests something profound about the nature of its reality. Characters die regularly, sometimes multiple times in the same episode, only to return without explanation. Brian has died and been brought back to life. Kenny McCormick from South Park has appeared in Family Guy, bringing his own resurrection mythology with him. This casual treatment of death isn't just a comedy device. It suggests that the characters exist in a reality where death is temporary or where multiple versions of the same character can exist simultaneously. Stewie has encountered alternate versions of himself and his family members from different timelines and dimensions. These aren't dreams or imagination sequences, but actual encounters with other versions of reality. The implications of this go far beyond simple comedy. If characters can die and return, if alternate versions of themselves exist in parallel dimensions, then the entire show might be taking place across multiple realities simultaneously. Each episode could be showing us events from different timelines or dimensions where slightly different versions of the characters exist. This would explain the show's inconsistent continuity and the way characters sometimes seem to forget major events from previous episodes. They're not forgetting, they're simply different versions of themselves who never experienced those events. The show isn't ignoring its own history. It's showing us glimpses of an infinite multiverse where every possible variation of the Griffin family's story plays out simultaneously. The religious and mythological elements in Family Guy also contribute to this deeper lore. The show has featured appearances by God, Jesus, the devil, and various other religious figures. These aren't parody versions, but actual supernatural entities who interact with the characters and influence events in Quahog. This suggests that the show's reality operates under a cosmology where divine and infernal forces are real and active. More intriguingly, these supernatural entities often seem to have specific interest in the Griffin family. God has personally intervened in their lives multiple times. Death himself has appeared as a character and formed relationships with family members. This level of cosmic attention suggests that the Griffins aren't just random people, but individuals who play important roles in some larger supernatural conflict or cosmic plan. The show's frequent use of cutaway gags might also be more than just random humor. These sequences often show Peter or other characters in completely different time periods, locations, or situations. What if these aren't imaginary scenarios, but glimpses of other realities where versions of these characters actually exist? The cutaway structure could be the show's way of revealing the multiverse that underlies its narrative. This interpretation would mean that every absurd cutaway gag is actually a window into an alternate dimension. Peter as a knight in medieval times isn't just a joke, it's a glimpse of a reality where a version of Peter actually lived during that era. The seemingly random nature of these sequences could be showing us how the barriers between dimensions occasionally thin, allowing characters to perceive events from parallel worlds. Cleveland Brown's spin-off show and eventual return to Family Guy takes on new significance in this context. His move to Virginia and subsequent return isn't just a narrative convenience, it's evidence of how characters can move between different versions of reality. The Cleveland show might have been showing us events from a dimension where Cleveland never moved back to Quahog, while his return to Family Guy represents a convergence of timelines. The relationship between Family Guy and other animated shows in the same universe adds another layer to this mythology. The Simpsons crossover episode wasn't just a marketing stunt. It was a demonstration that these shows exist in connected realities. Characters can travel between Springfield and Quahog because these locations exist in the same multiverse, just in different dimensional frequencies. As we dive deeper into the show's lore, we start to see patterns that suggest a hidden intelligence behind the chaos. The seemingly random events that plague the Griffin family might actually be tests or challenges designed by cosmic forces to determine their worthiness for some greater purpose. Stewie's advanced intelligence, Brian's existential awareness, Peter's reality-warping presence, and Lois's mysterious background could all be pieces of a larger puzzle. The show's self-aware humor and frequent breaking of the fourth wall might be characters occasionally becoming conscious of their true nature as beings in a constructed reality. When characters acknowledge that they're in a television show, they might be experiencing moments of cosmic awareness where they perceive the true nature of their existence. This brings us to perhaps the most mind-bending aspect of Family Guy's hidden lore. The show might be depicting the gradual awakening of its characters to their true nature as multidimensional beings trapped in a television narrative. Each season, the characters become slightly more aware of the absurdity of their situations and the arbitrary nature of the rules governing their reality. Stewie's evolution from would-be world conqueror to time-traveling adventurer represents his growing understanding of his cosmic nature. Brian's increasing cynicism and existential crises reflect his awareness that he's trapped between worlds. Peter's adventures become more outlandish because he's unconsciously pushing against the boundaries of his reality. Lois's hidden depths suggest she's always been aware of the truth, but has been protecting her family from it. The true horror and beauty of Family Guy's lore lies in this gradual revelation that nothing is as it seems. What appears to be random comedy is actually a complex meditation on the nature of reality, identity, and consciousness. The Griffin family's bizarre adventures are their unconscious attempts to break free from the limitations of their constructed world and discover their true nature as cosmic entities playing out an eternal story across infinite dimensions. So the next time you watch Family Guy, pay attention to the details that seem like throwaway gags. Notice how death has no permanent meaning, how reality bends around the characters, how they sometimes seem aware of forces beyond their comprehension. You're not just watching a comedy show. You're witnessing the gradual awakening of beings who are slowly discovering that they exist in a reality far stranger and more wonderful than they ever imagined. This is the true lore of Family Guy. Hidden beneath layers of crude humor and random cutaways, a story about consciousness trying to understand itself across multiple realities and infinite possibilities. Sweet dreams. Picture this. You're scrolling through endless videos trying to find something to help you drift off to sleep, and somehow you stumble across Family Guy lore. Sounds weird, right? But here's the thing that might surprise you. The chaotic world of the Griffin family actually contains some of the most bizarrely comforting storytelling patterns that work perfectly as background noise for sleep. Tonight, we're diving deep into the unexpected rabbit hole of Family Guy's hidden mythology, character backstories, and running gags that have been quietly building for over 2 decades. Trust me, by the end of this exploration, you'll understand why this animated chaos makes for surprisingly perfect sleep content. Let's start with something that might blow your mind. Family Guy isn't just random jokes thrown together. There's actually a complex web of continuity that runs through the entire series, creating this weird sense of familiarity that your brain craves when winding down. Think about it. Every episode follows certain predictable patterns. Peter does something stupid. Lois gets frustrated. Stewie plots world domination. Brian gets philosophical. Chris says something innocent yet profound, and Meg gets ignored. These patterns become almost meditative when you're not actively watching but just listening. The Griffin house itself has become this iconic location that feels more real than most TV homes. You know exactly where everything is. The living room with that brown couch facing the TV. The kitchen where most family arguments happen. Peter and Lois's bedroom where countless cutaway gags have originated. Stewie's room with all his advanced technology that somehow nobody questions. This geographical consistency creates a mental map that feels safe and familiar, exactly what your brain wants when transitioning to sleep. Now, let's talk about Peter Griffin's backstory, because it's way more elaborate than you might remember. Peter wasn't always the bumbling patriarch we know today. His childhood in Rhode Island shaped him in ways that the show has been slowly revealing for years. His relationship with his father, Mickey McFinnigan, later revealed to be Francis Griffin, created deep-seated issues around authority and approval that explained so much of his adult behavior. The revelation that Francis wasn't even his biological father added layers to Peter's identity crisis that runs throughout the series. Peter's various jobs throughout the show create this strange career timeline that somehow makes sense in the Family Guy universe. From his early days at the toy factory to his time at the brewery, each workplace became a setting for elaborate storylines and character development. His relationships with his co-workers like Joe, Quagmire, and Cleveland formed the foundation of the show's secondary character network. These aren't just random neighbors. They're part of an intricate social ecosystem that's been developing since episode 1. Speaking of Joe Swanson, his backstory represents some of the show's most surprisingly deep storytelling. The details of how he became paralyzed have been explored multiple times, each revealing adding new layers to his character. His police career, his relationship with his wife Bonnie, and his struggles with his disability are handled with unexpected sensitivity for a show known for its controversial humor. Joe's friendship with Peter represents this weird masculine bond that transcends typical sitcom relationships. Glenn Quagmire might seem like a one-note character, but his history is incredibly complex. His career as a pilot isn't just a job setup for jokes. It's connected to his adventurous personality, his worldliness, and his complex relationship with commitment. The episodes exploring his relationship with his father, his various romantic entanglements, and his twisted psychology reveal a character struggling with deeper issues beneath the surface humor. His rivalry with Brian creates ongoing tension that drives multiple episode plots. Cleveland Brown's departure and return to the show created this weird narrative gap that the writers have handled in interesting ways. His move to Stoolbend and eventual return to Quahog wasn't just a business decision. It was woven into the show's mythology in ways that acknowledge the real-world circumstances while maintaining fictional continuity. His relationship with his new wife Donna and his blended family created storylines that explored themes of second chances and family dynamics. Brian Griffin represents perhaps the show's most complex character development. He's not just a talking dog, he's a struggling writer, a recovering alcoholic, a liberal intellectual, and Peter's best friend, all wrapped into one character. His various romantic relationships, from his puppy love crushes to his serious adult relationships, have been explored with surprising depth. His death and resurrection created one of the show's most emotionally impactful storylines, proving that viewers had formed genuine emotional attachments to these characters. Brian's literary aspirations connect to larger themes about artistic struggle and unfulfilled potential that run throughout the series. His unfinished novel, his various writing projects, and his intellectual pretensions create this ongoing character arc about creativity and disappointment. His relationship with Stewie represents one of television's most unique friendships, transcending the typical pet owner dynamic to become something genuinely touching. Stewie Griffin's evolution from world-conquering villain to sexually confused genius baby represents one of the most significant character developments in animation history. His early episodes focused on elaborate schemes to kill Lois and take over the world. Gradually, the show revealed deeper layers to his personality, exploring his relationships, his sexuality, and his genuine affection for his family, despite his sinister exterior. The time travel episodes featuring Stewie and Brian created an entire subplot mythology that spans multiple seasons. Their adventures through different time periods aren't just random comedy sketches. They're connected stories that explore themes of friendship, consequence, and the nature of reality itself. These episodes often contain the show's most sophisticated storytelling and emotional moments. Lois Griffin's background as a member of the wealthy Pewterschmidt family adds class dynamics to the show that create ongoing storylines. Her relationship with her parents, particularly her disapproving father Carter, creates tension that drives multiple episode plots. Her past as a fighter pilot, her various career attempts, and her struggles with being married to Peter add complexity to what could have been a simple housewife character. The Pewterschmidt family wealth creates opportunities for episodes exploring economic disparity, social climbing, and family expectations. Lois's siblings and their various successes highlight Peter's failures, while also exploring themes about different paths to happiness and fulfillment. These family dynamics feel surprisingly realistic for a cartoon family. Chris Griffin might seem like the least developed Griffin family member, but his character has subtle depths that emerge over time. His artistic talents, his social struggles, and his innocent observations about adult world create moments of unexpected wisdom. His relationship with his father Peter explores themes about masculine expectations and parent-child communication that feel genuine despite the show's comedic framework. Meg Griffin's role as the family scapegoat has evolved into something more complex than simple abuse humor. Episodes exploring her internal life, her social struggles, and her occasional moments of strength reveal a character dealing with realistic teenage issues. Her relationship with her family, particularly her mother Lois, touches on themes about parental favoritism and sibling dynamics that many viewers can relate to. The show's supporting characters create this entire universe of interconnected relationships. Characters like Mayor West, Principal Shepard, Dr. Hartman, and the various shopkeepers and townspeople aren't just one-off joke characters. They're part of Quahog's social fabric, appearing consistently enough to create familiarity and continuity that makes the fictional town feel like a real place. The recurring villains, like Ernie the giant chicken, the greased-up deaf guy, and various one-episode antagonists, create ongoing storylines that span multiple seasons. These aren't just random encounters. They're part of Peter's personal mythology, representing different aspects of his character conflicts and growth. Family Guy's cutaway gags might seem random, but they actually follow certain patterns and themes that create consistency within the chaos. The historical references, the pop culture parodies, and the absurdist scenarios often connect to the main storyline in subtle ways, reinforcing character traits or episode themes through seemingly unrelated comedy bits. The show's approach to continuity is uniquely flexible, allowing for both strict adherence to character development and complete abandonment of logic when comedy demands it. This creates a viewing experience that feels both familiar and unpredictable, perfect for background listening where you can drift in and out without losing track of what's happening. The musical elements of Family Guy, from Conway Twitty appearances to elaborate song numbers, create rhythm and pacing that works well for sleep content. These musical interludes provide natural breaks in dialogue while maintaining the show's energy and entertainment value. The familiar melodies and recurring musical themes create audio comfort that helps with relaxation. The voice acting consistency across hundreds of episodes creates character familiarity that transcends individual storylines. Seth MacFarlane's multiple character voices, along with the consistent supporting cast, create audio comfort that works particularly well when you're not actively watching. These familiar voices become almost like friendly companions as you drift off to sleep. The show's treatment of holidays and special occasions has created annual traditions within the Family Guy universe. Christmas episodes, Halloween specials, and other holiday-themed stories create seasonal familiarity that connects to real-world calendar events while maintaining the show's unique comedic perspective. These special episodes often contain the series' most heartfelt moments alongside the typical humor. Family Guy's approach to social commentary, while often controversial, creates ongoing themes about American culture, politics, and social issues that give depth to what could be purely surface-level comedy. The show's willingness to tackle difficult subjects, even through its comedic lens, creates content that engages with real-world issues while maintaining entertainment value. The international episodes and travel storylines have created a broader world beyond Quahog, showing how the Griffin family dynamics work in different settings while maintaining character consistency. These episodes expand the show's mythology while reinforcing core character traits and relationships that define the series. As we wind down this exploration of Family Guy's hidden depths, it's worth noting how the show's longevity has created this massive tapestry of interconnected stories, character developments, and running gags that form a complete fictional universe. Whether you're using it as sleep content or just appreciating its complexity, Family Guy offers way more than surface-level entertainment. The familiar voices, predictable patterns, and comforting chaos create perfect background audio for relaxation. Sweet dreams. And remember, tomorrow there will always be more Family Guy lore to discover and explore in this wonderfully weird animated world that's been part of our cultural landscape for over 20 years. Have you ever wondered why a cartoon dog can talk but nobody questions it? Or why a baby genius plots world domination while his parents argue about mundane household problems? Family Guy might seem like random chaos on the surface, but buried beneath all those cutaway gags and pop culture references lies a surprisingly deep well of hidden lore that most fans have never discovered. Today we're diving into the secret backstories, deleted scenes, and creator revelations that completely change how you see the Griffin family forever. Before we start unraveling these mysteries, let me ask you something. How many times have you watched Family Guy and thought you caught every single joke? Well, prepare to have your mind blown, because what I'm about to share will make you want to rewatch every episode with completely fresh eyes. From the real reason Stewie's head is shaped the way it is, to the dark truth about why Brian walks on two legs, these aren't just fun facts. These are game-changing revelations that Seth MacFarlane and his team have been hiding in plain sight for over 2 decades. Let's start with something that'll make you question everything you thought you knew about the show's most iconic character. Stewie Griffin isn't just some random genius baby who happens to speak with a British accent. According to early production notes that surfaced years later, Seth MacFarlane originally conceived Stewie as having a specific psychological condition that explains both his advanced intelligence and his distinctive way of speaking. The creators deliberately designed his football-shaped head as a visual metaphor for the pressure building inside his developing brain, representing the conflict between his infant body and his mature mind. But here's where it gets really interesting. MacFarlane revealed in a rarely seen interview that Stewie's British accent isn't actually British at all. It's what's called a mid-Atlantic accent, the same affected speech pattern used by wealthy Americans in the early 20th century to sound more sophisticated. This detail wasn't chosen randomly. The creators wanted to show that even as a baby, Stewie is already performing a version of himself, putting on airs to match his intellectual superiority complex. Now, you might be thinking this is just creative interpretation, but wait until you hear about the episodes that never made it to air. There was an entire storyline planned for Season 3 that would have revealed Stewie's accent comes from his obsession with old Hollywood films that he watches late at night when the family is sleeping. The episode would have shown him mimicking Cary Grant and Katharine Hepburn movies, explaining both his sophisticated vocabulary and his theatrical mannerisms. This backstory was ultimately scrapped because the writers felt it made Stewie too sympathetic and would have undermined his role as the show's primary antagonist. Speaking of characters with hidden depths, let's talk about Brian Griffin. Most people assume he's just a talking dog who drinks martinis and considers himself an intellectual. But the real lore behind Brian is much darker than you might expect. In the show's original pitch Bible, Brian wasn't always an anthropomorphic character. He started as a regular dog who gained human-like intelligence through a laboratory experiment gone wrong. This origin story was briefly referenced in early episodes through subtle visual cues that most viewers missed entirely. Remember how Brian occasionally displays knowledge about topics that would be impossible for a regular dog to understand? That's not just for comedic effect. The writers planted clues throughout the series, suggesting that Brian retains fragmented memories from his time as a test subject. His alcoholism isn't just a character quirk for adult humor. It's actually his way of coping with the psychological trauma of having his consciousness artificially altered. The constant drinking helps suppress the disturbing memories of his transformation, which is why he becomes increasingly anxious and neurotic when he's sober for extended periods. This connects to another piece of hidden lore that completely reframes Brian's relationship with the Griffin family. In deleted scenes from the pilot episode, there was supposed to be a moment where Brian accidentally reveals that he remembers being adopted by the Griffins, not born into the family. The implication was that Peter rescued Brian from the laboratory, not knowing about the experiments that had been performed on him. This would explain why Peter treats Brian more like an equal than a pet, and why the rest of the family accepts his human-like behavior without question. But the Brian revelations don't stop there. McFarlane once mentioned in a commentary track that Brian's literary aspirations aren't just pretentious posturing. They're actually his subconscious attempt to document his experiences and process his trauma through fiction. All those terrible novels he writes are supposedly coded accounts of his memories from before the experiments. The reason his writing is so bad isn't because he lacks talent. It's because he's trying to express experiences that his brain can't properly access or understand. Now let's shift gears and talk about Peter Griffin, because there's lore surrounding him that's been hiding in plain sight for years. You know how Peter has all these random jobs throughout the series and somehow always ends up in bizarre situations that no normal person would survive? There's actually a consistent explanation for this that the writers have been building since season 1. Peter isn't just lucky or cartoonishly resilient. According to production notes, he's supposed to represent the concept of the American dream taken to its most absurd extreme. Every job change, every wild adventure, every impossible survival is meant to show how someone with absolutely no qualifications or common sense can still stumble into success in America if they have enough confidence and persistence. But here's the twist that most fans miss. Peter's apparent stupidity isn't natural. It's a learned behavior that he developed as a defense mechanism against the crushing reality of adult responsibility. This theory is supported by episodes where Peter demonstrates surprising competence in specific situations, usually when his family is genuinely threatened. The writers intentionally show glimpses of a more capable Peter to suggest that his buffoonery is partially an act. He plays dumb because it allows him to avoid dealing with complex emotional situations and lets him shirk responsibility for his actions. It's actually a fairly sophisticated psychological portrait, disguised as slapstick comedy. The most mind-blowing piece of Peter lore involves his relationship with his father, Francis. In cutscenes from several episodes, there were supposed to be flashbacks showing that Peter's fear of authority and his rebellious nature stem from having an abusive father who constantly belittled his intelligence. Peter's current behavior is his way of rebelling against Francis even after his death, choosing to embrace stupidity as a form of posthumous defiance. This adds a tragic dimension to Peter's character that completely changes how you interpret his most outrageous moments. Let's move on to Lois, because her hidden backstory might be the most shocking of all. Most viewers see Lois as the long-suffering wife who somehow puts up with Peter's antics while trying to hold the family together. But there's lore suggesting that Lois is actually the most psychologically complex character in the entire show. Her wealthy background isn't just a plot device for occasional storylines about her family's money. It's the key to understanding her entire personality and motivation structure. According to early character development documents, Lois deliberately chose to marry Peter precisely because he was the opposite of everything her upper-class family expected from her. Her attraction to Peter wasn't romantic love in the traditional sense. It was her way of rebelling against the suffocating expectations of her privileged upbringing. This explains why she stays with Peter despite his obvious flaws and why she occasionally enables his worst behavior instead of putting her foot down. But here's where it gets really interesting. Lois's musical talents and her occasional displays of impressive competence aren't random character traits. They're remnants of the extensive education and training she received growing up in a wealthy family. The piano playing, the singing, the moments where she demonstrates sophisticated knowledge about art or culture, these are all parts of her original identity that she's trying to suppress in favor of her chosen role as a middle-class housewife. There was supposed to be an entire episode arc exploring Lois's internal conflict between her natural capabilities and her chosen lifestyle. The storyline would have revealed that she sometimes resents Peter not because he's difficult to live with, but because staying with him requires her to constantly diminish herself to avoid making him feel inadequate. This dynamic would have added incredible depth to their relationship and explained why their marriage has such a volatile quality. The Lois lore gets even deeper when you consider her relationship with her children. Her overprotectiveness of Meg isn't just maternal instinct. It's actually Lois projecting her own fears about conformity and social acceptance onto her daughter. Lois sees Meg struggling with the same issues she faced growing up, trying to fit in while dealing with family dynamics that set her apart from her peers. The reason Lois sometimes fails to defend Meg effectively is because she's reliving her own teenage trauma through her daughter's experiences. Now we need to talk about Meg, because there's lore surrounding her character that's both heartbreaking and brilliant. Everyone knows that Meg serves as the family scapegoat, constantly bullied and ignored by everyone around her. But according to Seth MacFarlane's original vision, Meg's role in the family isn't accidental. She's deliberately positioned as the emotional lightning rod that keeps the rest of the family functional. In early scripts, there were scenes showing that Meg is actually aware of her role as the family punching bag and has made a conscious decision to accept it because she understands that her family needs someone to blame for their problems. This makes Meg arguably the most mature and self-sacrificing member of the Griffin family, which completely reframes every joke made at her expense. The writers planted subtle clues throughout the series, suggesting that Meg has incredible inner strength and resilience that she hides from everyone around her. Her moments of competence and insight are deliberately rare because she's learned that showing her true capabilities threatens the family's emotional equilibrium. When Meg does stand up for herself, it usually creates chaos that ultimately gets resolved by her returning to her scapegoat role. There's also lore suggesting that Meg's unpopularity at school isn't entirely natural. Some episodes hint that she's unconsciously sabotaging her own social relationships because she's terrified of abandoning her family role. If Meg became popular and confident, she'd have to confront the fact that her family's treatment of her is abusive rather than merely unfortunate. It's easier for her to believe that she deserves the treatment she receives than to acknowledge that her family is fundamentally dysfunctional. The most devastating piece of Meg lore comes from deleted scenes, showing her keeping a secret journal where she documents all the cruel things her family says and does to her. But instead of expressing anger or hurt, the journal entries show Meg trying to understand and justify their behavior, constantly blaming herself for not being good enough to earn their love and respect. This transforms Meg from a simple comedy target into a genuinely tragic character whose story reflects real issues about family scapegoating and emotional abuse. Let's talk about some of the broader lore that affects the entire show's universe. Family Guy takes place in a world where cartoon logic applies, but there are consistent rules governing how that logic works. The cutaway gags aren't just random non sequiturs. They're actually windows into alternate realities or parallel dimensions that exist alongside the main Family Guy universe. This explains why the characters in cutaways sometimes have different personalities, or why historical events play out differently than in real life. Seth MacFarlane confirmed in interviews that he conceived the cutaway structure as a way to explore infinite possibilities within the show's framework. Each cutaway represents a potential timeline or alternative version of reality where different choices led to different outcomes. This means that every absurd scenario we see in a cutaway is actually happening somewhere in the broader Family Guy multiverse. This multiverse concept also explains some of the show's apparent continuity errors. When characters die and then reappear later, or when major events get reset without explanation, it's not sloppy writing. It's the show jumping between different dimensional versions of the Griffin family. The Brian death and resurrection storyline was actually a deliberate exploration of this concept, showing viewers what happens when the timeline gets significantly altered. There's also lore about Quahog itself that most viewers never notice. The town isn't just a generic setting for the Griffin family's adventures. It's specifically designed to represent a kind of American purgatory where nothing ever really changes or progresses. The residents of Quahog are stuck in perpetual cycles of the same mistakes and conflicts, which is why the characters can experience dramatic growth in one episode only, to return to their baseline personalities by the next episode. The writers have hidden references throughout the series, suggesting that Quahog exists in a temporal bubble where time moves differently than in the outside world. This explains why the characters never seem to age significantly, and why technological advancement happens inconsistently. It's not that the show ignores the passage of time. It's that Quahog itself is resistant to change, trapping its residents in an eternal present where growth and development are always temporary. As we wrap up this deep dive into Family Guy's hidden lore, it's worth noting that much of this information comes from sources that aren't widely available to casual fans. Production notes, Deleted scenes, creator interviews, and behind-the-scenes materials reveal a level of thought and planning that's far more sophisticated than the show's reputation might suggest. Seth MacFarlane and his team have created a rich mythology that operates beneath the surface of what appears to be simple shock humor. The next time you watch Family Guy, pay attention to the details we've discussed today. Look for the subtle clues about character motivations, the hints about hidden backstories, and the consistent internal logic that governs even the most absurd situations. You'll discover that this apparently chaotic comedy actually follows carefully constructed rules that make every character more complex and interesting than they initially appear. What's most impressive about Family Guy's hidden lore is how it enhances rather than contradicts the show's comedic elements. Understanding Stewie's psychological complexity makes his schemes funnier, not less funny. Knowing about Brian's tragic backstory adds depth to his pretentious behavior without undermining the humor. Recognizing Meg's secret strength makes her mistreatment more poignant while still allowing the jokes to land. This is the mark of truly sophisticated comedy writing. The best humor comes from characters who feel real and situations that feel authentic, even when they're completely absurd. By building detailed backstories and consistent internal logic, the Family Guy writers created a foundation that supports both genuine emotional moments and outrageous comedic scenarios. So there you have it, the secret lore of Family Guy that changes everything about how you understand the show. From Stewie's artificial accent to Brian's laboratory origins, from Peter's defensive stupidity to Lois's suppressed identity, from Meg's conscious martyrdom to Quahog's temporal peculiarities. These hidden elements transform a seemingly simple cartoon into something much richer and more complex. Which of these revelations surprised you the most? Are there other aspects of Family Guy lore that you think deserve more attention? Let me know in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the hidden secrets of your favorite shows. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled twice by Fox and nearly became lost media forever? Or that Seth MacFarlane almost died in the September 11th attacks but missed his flight because of a hangover? Welcome to the bizarre, twisted, and absolutely fascinating world of Family Guy lore that most fans have never heard about. I'm talking about secrets so wild that they make the show's most outrageous episodes look tame by comparison. We're diving deep into the creation myths, the behind-the-scenes drama, the near-death experiences, and the corporate battles that shaped one of television's most controversial animated series. Trust me, by the end of this video, you'll never watch Family Guy the same way again. Let's start with something that will blow your mind. Seth MacFarlane, the creator and voice of Peter Griffin, Brian, and Stewie, was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 1-1 on September 11th, 2001. That's right, the same flight that crashed into the North Tower of the World Trade Center. But here's the crazy part. He overslept because he was hungover from a party the night before and his travel agent had given him the wrong departure time. If he had made that flight, Family Guy would never have existed beyond its first season, and animation history would be completely different. But that's just the beginning of this incredible story. Family Guy has one of the most bizarre resurrection tales in television history. The show premiered in 1999 and was actually performing decently in the ratings, but Fox kept moving it around to different time slots. You know how networks love to do that, right? Well, they moved it so many times that viewers couldn't keep track of when it was on. Eventually, Fox canceled it in 2002 after just 3 seasons. Here's where it gets interesting, though. While the show was dead on television, something magical was happening in the afterlife. Adult Swim picked up the syndication rights and started airing reruns late at night. College students and young adults discovered the show and fell in love with it. At the same time, DVD sales were going through the roof. The first season DVD became one of the best-selling TV show DVDs of all time, and suddenly Fox realized they had made a massive mistake. So in 2005, Fox did something almost unprecedented in television history. They brought back a canceled show based purely on DVD sales and cable reruns. Family Guy became the first show ever to be revived solely because of its success in syndication and home video. It was like watching a TV show literally rise from the dead. But the resurrection story gets even weirder. When Fox brought the show back, they didn't just order a few episodes to test the waters. They ordered 53 new episodes right off the bat. That's an enormous vote of confidence for a show that had already been canceled once. Seth MacFarlane suddenly went from unemployed animator to one of the most powerful people in Hollywood practically overnight. Now let's talk about the creative origins of the show, because they're absolutely fascinating. Seth MacFarlane created Family Guy when he was just 24 years old, fresh out of the Rhode Island School of Design. But here's what most people don't know. The show was originally pitched as a much more traditional family sitcom. The early concepts were way more grounded and realistic than what we ended up with. The character of Peter Griffin was originally going to be much more like a typical TV dad, still bumbling and overweight, but not the complete psychopath we know and love today. Stewie wasn't even going to be particularly smart or evil in the original concept. He was just going to be a regular baby with maybe slightly advanced vocabulary. Brian was going to be a normal dog who occasionally made witty observations but wasn't going to be a full conversation partner for the family. What changed everything was Seth MacFarlane's love of old Hollywood and classic animation. He grew up watching Looney Tunes, Tom and Jerry, and classic Disney cartoons, and he wanted to bring that level of visual comedy and surreal humor to primetime television. The problem was that most networks were terrified of anything too weird or experimental. Fox, however, was in a unique position in the late 90s. The Simpsons had proven that animated shows could work in prime time, but Fox was still considered the edgy, rebellious network. They were willing to take risks that ABC, CBS, and NBC would never consider. So when Seth pitched his cartoon about a dysfunctional family in Rhode Island, Fox was intrigued enough to order a pilot. The pilot episode is actually incredibly different from the show we know today. The animation style was cruder, the jokes were more straightforward, and the characters hadn't yet developed their extreme personalities. If you watch that original pilot, you can barely recognize it as the same show. It's like looking at baby photos of a celebrity. You can kind of see the resemblance, but it's clearly a work in progress. One of the most fascinating aspects of Family Guy's development is how the characters evolved over time. Take Stewie, for example. In the early seasons, he was genuinely trying to kill Lois and take over the world. His evil schemes were the driving force behind many episodes. But as the show went on, the writers realized that Stewie was funnier when he was dealing with more relatable problems, like sexuality, relationships, and growing up. This evolution wasn't accidental. It reflected Seth MacFarlane's own growth as a writer and person. When he created Stewie, MacFarlane was a young, single guy who thought evil baby plots were hilarious. But as he got older and more experienced, he realized that character-driven comedy was more sustainable than pure shock value. The same thing happened with Brian. Originally, he was just the voice of reason in the Griffin household, the one sane character who could comment on everyone else's craziness. But over time, the writers started exploring Brian's flaws and insecurities, turning him into one of the most complex characters on television. His pretentiousness, his failed writing career, his drinking problem, all of these traits developed organically as the show matured. Speaking of character development, let's talk about some of the inspiration behind the Griffin family. Peter Griffin was actually based on a security guard that Seth MacFarlane worked with during a summer job. The guy was loud, obnoxious, and completely inappropriate, but somehow lovable at the same time. MacFarlane found himself fascinated by how someone could be so offensive, yet still maintain friendships and a family. Lois was inspired by MacFarlane's own mother, but also by the classic TV mom archetype. The twist was making her come from a wealthy family, which allowed the writers to explore themes of class and privilege. It also gave them an excuse to put the Griffins in situations they normally couldn't afford, like fancy parties and expensive vacations. The supporting characters have equally interesting origins. Glenn Quagmire was originally supposed to be a minor character who appeared in maybe 1 or 2 episodes, but Seth MacFarlane's voice performance was so distinctive and memorable that the writers kept bringing him back. The giggity giggity catchphrase wasn't even scripted. MacFarlane improvised it during recording, and everyone thought it was so funny that they made it Quagmire's signature sound. Cleveland Brown started as a simple background character, but MacFarlane realized that having a calm, reasonable neighbor made Peter's craziness even funnier by contrast. The character became so popular that he eventually got his own spin-off show, though that's a whole other story of corporate politics and creative struggles. One of the most controversial aspects of Family Guy is its use of cutaway gags, those random flashbacks that have nothing to do with the main plot. Some critics hate them, calling them lazy writing and cheap laughs. But here's the thing. Those cutaways were actually inspired by some of the most sophisticated comedy ever created. Seth MacFarlane grew up watching Monty Python's Flying Circus, and he was fascinated by how the Pythons would interrupt their sketches with completely random animations and non sequiturs. He also loved the Marx Brothers movies, where the plot would screech to a halt for a musical number or a bizarre comedy bit that had nothing to do with anything else. The cutaway gags serve a specific purpose in Family Guy's comedy structure. They allow the writers to do jokes that would be impossible within the constraints of a normal sitcom plot. Want to make fun of a celebrity or reference an obscure movie? Just have Peter say, "This reminds me of the time I," and cut to whatever crazy scenario you can imagine. But here's something most fans don't realize. Many of those cutaways are actually incredibly expensive to produce. Each one requires new character designs, new backgrounds, new voice acting, and sometimes even new music. A single 30-second cutaway can cost more to animate than an entire scene of regular dialogue. Fox executives were initially horrified by how much money the show was spending on these seemingly throwaway jokes. The financial aspect of Family Guy is actually one of the most interesting parts of its story. When the show first premiered, animation was still considered a niche market for adults. The Simpsons was successful, but it was seen as a unique exception rather than proof that there was a broader market for animated comedy. Family Guy's success helped prove that there was actually a huge appetite for adult animated shows. This paved the way for series like American Dad, The Cleveland Show, Archer, Rick and Morty, and countless others. Without Family Guy's commercial success, the entire landscape of adult animation might look completely different today. The merchandising aspect is equally fascinating. Family Guy products generate hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue every year. T-shirts, toys, video games, Christmas ornaments, you name it, and there's probably a Family Guy version of it. The Stewie character alone has spawned an entire industry of baby-themed merchandise with surprisingly dark humor. But perhaps the most interesting aspect of Family Guy's cultural impact is how it changed the way we think about offensive comedy. The show pushes boundaries that would have been unthinkable on television even 10 years before it premiered. Yet somehow, it manages to get away with jokes that would destroy other shows. The secret is in the show's self-awareness. Family Guy knows that it's offensive, and it's constantly making jokes about its own offensiveness. When Peter does something terrible, the other characters usually call him out on it. When the show makes a controversial reference, it often follows it up with a joke about how inappropriate the reference was. This meta-humor creates a kind of protective bubble around the show's more controversial content. Viewers understand that they're not supposed to take Peter Griffin seriously as a role model. He's clearly meant to be a cautionary tale about what happens when someone has no filter and no self-awareness. The voice acting on Family Guy deserves its own deep dive because it's honestly incredible. Seth MacFarlane voices 4 of the main characters: Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire, plus dozens of supporting characters and celebrity impersonations. His range is absolutely mind-blowing when you really think about it. But here's what's even more impressive. MacFarlane often records conversations between his own characters. That means he's essentially having entire dramatic scenes with himself, switching between voices and maintaining the emotional continuity of multiple characters simultaneously. It's like watching a one-man theater performance every time you see Peter and Brian have a heart-to-heart conversation. The other voice actors are equally talented. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois, also does dozens of supporting characters, including the Griffin's maid Consuela. Mila Kunis took over the voice of Meg after the first season, and her performance evolved from simple teenager dialogue to some of the show's most emotionally complex moments. Seth Green voices Chris Griffin, and his portrayal perfectly captures that awkward teenage energy. Green actually ad-libs a lot of Chris's dialogue, particularly the character's weird sound effects and random observations. Many of Chris's funniest moments come from Green just improvising during recording sessions. The show's relationship with Fox has always been complicated and fascinating. On one hand, Family Guy makes enormous amounts of money for the network. On the other hand, it constantly creates controversy and pushes the boundaries of what's acceptable on broadcast television. There have been numerous instances where Fox executives have asked the writers to tone down certain jokes or storylines. Sometimes the writers comply, but often they find creative ways to work around the censorship. This has led to some incredibly clever wordplay and visual innuendo that's actually funnier than whatever the original joke was going to be. The international success of Family Guy is another interesting chapter in its story. The show airs in dozens of countries around the world, and each market has its own unique censorship challenges. Some countries cut entire scenes, while others dub over offensive dialogue with completely different jokes. In some markets, Stewie's sexuality is completely removed from his character arc. In others, references to religion or politics are heavily edited. This has created dozens of different versions of the show, each tailored to local sensitivities and cultural norms. Looking at Family Guy's legacy today, it's clear that the show fundamentally changed television comedy. It proved that audiences were hungry for more experimental, boundary-pushing content. It showed that animation could be a vehicle for sophisticated adult humor, not just children's entertainment. The show also pioneered many techniques that are now standard in comedy writing. The use of pop culture references as comedic shorthand, the mixing of high and low culture, the willingness to completely abandon plot for the sake of a good joke. These are all techniques that you can see in countless comedies today. But perhaps most importantly, Family Guy proved that television shows could have multiple lives. The fact that it survived cancellation and came back stronger than ever showed other creators that there were new paths to success beyond traditional network approval. As we wrap up this deep dive into Family Guy lore, it's worth noting that the show is still evolving and changing. Seth MacFarlane has stepped back from day-to-day involvement to focus on other projects, but the show continues under new leadership. Each season brings new controversies, new characters, and new ways to push the boundaries of what's possible on television. Whether you love it or hate it, Family Guy has left an indelible mark on popular culture. It's a show that dared to be different, survived multiple attempts to kill it, and emerged as one of the most successful and influential comedies of the modern era. And honestly, that's pretty giggity if you ask me. Picture this. You're lying in bed, eyes heavy, ready to drift off to sleep, but your mind is still buzzing. Maybe you need something to help you unwind, something familiar and comforting that won't keep you too engaged. Well, tonight we're diving into the weird and wonderful world of Family Guy, with some absolutely wild facts that might just be the perfect bedtime companion. These aren't your typical trivia tidbits. We're talking about the kind of behind-the-scenes secrets and bizarre details that make this show the cultural phenomenon it became. Let me start with something that'll blow your mind right away. Did you know that Family Guy was actually canceled not once, but twice? Yeah, you heard that right. The show got the axe in 2002 after just 3 seasons, then came back in 2005, only to get canceled again in 2007. But here's where it gets interesting. The show's resurrection wasn't because of some executive's change of heart or a passionate fan campaign, though those things helped. It was actually because of DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim that proved the show had a massive audience that networks had completely missed. The numbers were staggering. When Fox looked at the DVD sales figures, they realized they'd made a colossal mistake. The first season DVD became one of the best-selling TV show DVDs of all time, moving over 1 million copies in its first year. Adult Swim was paying Fox millions for the rerun rights, and the ratings were through the roof. It was like discovering you'd thrown away a winning lottery ticket, except you could still fish it out of the trash. But here's something even weirder about the show's cancellation drama. Seth MacFarlane, the creator, was actually somewhat relieved when it got canceled the first time. He was completely burned out from working insane hours, writing, voice acting, and overseeing every aspect of production. The guy was doing the voices for 3 main characters while running the entire show. When Fox pulled the plug, he thought his animation career might be over, but he also felt like he could finally breathe again. Speaking of Seth MacFarlane, here's a fact that'll keep you up at night thinking about alternate timelines. He was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11 on September 11, 2001, the flight that hit the North Tower of the World Trade Center. He missed it because his travel agent gave him the wrong departure time, and he showed up to the gate 10 minutes after boarding had ended. He was hungover from partying the night before, and almost didn't go to the airport at all. That single hangover and miscommunication might have changed television history forever. Now let's talk about something that'll make you appreciate the show's attention to detail. Every single Conway Twitty cutaway gag. You know those random moments where the show just cuts to the country singer performing for what feels like an eternity? Those weren't just random filler. They were actually Seth MacFarlane's way of trolling both the network and the audience. He knew these segments would drive people absolutely crazy, but he also knew they couldn't be cut because they were integral to reaching the episode's required runtime. The Conway Twitty thing became such a phenomenon that it spawned its own internal mythology at the show. Writers would pitch entire episodes around how they could work in a Conway Twitty segment. They'd sit in the writer's room timing these segments down to the second, calculating exactly how much actual story content they could replace with a dead country singer performing on stage. It was comedic genius disguised as laziness. Here's something that might surprise you about the show's voice acting. You know how Brian the dog sounds so sophisticated and intellectual? Well, Seth MacFarlane based that voice on his own natural speaking voice, but slightly more pretentious. He said in interviews that Brian represents the version of himself he'd be if he let his college education go to his head. The character became a way for MacFarlane to explore his own intellectual insecurities and liberal political views through a talking dog. But the really fascinating part is how the other voice actors developed their characters. Alex Borstein, who voices Lois, originally auditioned for a completely different character on a different show MacFarlane was developing. When that project fell through, he remembered her voice and wrote Lois specifically for her. The character's Long Island accent and particular speech patterns are actually based on Borstein's own family members. Seth Green, who voices Chris, has admitted that he sometimes forgets he's supposed to be playing a teenager. He said the character's voice just comes naturally to him because it's basically his own voice from when he was going through puberty, which apparently lasted well into his 20s. The character's dim-witted but lovable personality evolved because Green kept improvising lines that made the writers laugh during recording sessions. Now here's a production fact that'll make you realize how much work goes into seemingly simple animation. Each episode of Family Guy takes approximately 8 to 9 months to produce, from script to final broadcast. The writing process alone can take several months, with jokes being written, rewritten, and completely scrapped dozens of times. Then there's the voice recording, which happens in multiple sessions as scripts get revised. The animation process is where things get really wild. Every single frame has to be drawn by hand, even though the show uses computer software to assist with the process. A single 22-minute episode contains roughly 16,000 individual drawings. When you think about the fact that the show has produced over 400 episodes, that's literally millions of individual drawings that have brought these characters to life. But here's something that'll make you appreciate the show's cultural impact even more. Family Guy popularized the random cutaway gag format that's now become standard in animated comedy. Before Family Guy, most animated shows followed more traditional narrative structures. The show's willingness to completely abandon the main plot for a 30-second historical recreation or pop culture reference changed how comedy writers think about pacing and attention spans. The cutaway gags themselves have become a cultural phenomenon. There are entire YouTube channels dedicated to compiling them, and they've been referenced and parodied by countless other shows. But here's what's really interesting. The writers have admitted that sometimes they write the cutaway gag first, then build an entire episode around finding a way to naturally lead into it. Let's talk about something that might disturb your peaceful drift toward sleep: the show's relationship with censorship. Family Guy has been censored, banned, and protested more than almost any other primetime animated series. The Parents Television Council has named it the worst show on television multiple times. But here's the thing. All that controversy has only made the show more popular. The censorship battles have led to some genuinely creative solutions from the writers. When they can't say certain words or show certain images, they find increasingly elaborate ways to imply them. Some of the show's funniest moments have come from these creative workarounds. It's like watching a comedian perform with their hands tied behind their back, and somehow becoming even funnier because of the constraint. Here's a fact about the show's music that might surprise you. Seth MacFarlane is actually a classically trained vocalist who's released several albums of standards and jazz music. His musical background heavily influences the show's frequent musical numbers and elaborate song and dance sequences. Those aren't just random additions. They're McFarlane showing off skills he developed long before he ever got into animation. The musical episodes of Family Guy often take months of additional preparation because they require completely different animation techniques, additional voice coaching for the actors, and original orchestral arrangements. The Blue Harvest Star Wars parody episodes alone required hiring an entire orchestra to record new versions of John Williams' iconic themes. Now, let's dive into something that'll make you think about celebrity culture differently. The show's celebrity cameos and parodies have occasionally led to real-world consequences for the celebrities involved. Some stars have embraced being mocked on the show, treating it as a badge of honor. Others have publicly complained or even threatened legal action. But here's what's really fascinating. Some celebrities have specifically requested to be made fun of on Family Guy because they know it'll keep them relevant in pop culture. The show has become such a cultural touchstone that being parodied on it is almost like being inducted into a Hall of Fame of American entertainment figures. The writers have developed an entire system for deciding which celebrities to target. They consider factors like current relevance, comedic potential, and likelihood of legal retaliation. There's literally a legal department that reviews every celebrity reference to make sure the show won't get sued into oblivion. Here's something about the show's international appeal that might keep your mind wandering as you fall asleep. Family Guy airs in over 100 countries, but many episodes have to be heavily edited or completely banned in certain regions due to cultural sensitivities or government censorship. The writers have become experts at predicting which jokes will translate across cultures and which ones will get the show pulled off the air in entire countries. The international dubbing process is particularly fascinating. Voice actors in different countries have to capture not just the literal translations of the jokes, but also the timing, delivery, and cultural references that make the humor work. Sometimes entire scenes have to be rewritten for different markets, with completely different jokes that serve the same narrative function. Speaking of narrative function, here's something about the show's storytelling that might surprise you. Despite its reputation for random, stream-of-consciousness humor, every episode follows extremely strict structural guidelines. The writers use a detailed formula for pacing, character development, and plot progression that's remained virtually unchanged since the show's early seasons. The formula is so precise that new writers go through extensive training to learn it. They practice writing sample episodes that hit specific comedic beats at exact timing intervals. It's like learning to write music in a very particular key and tempo. There's way more technical skill involved than most viewers realize. Here's a production detail that'll make you appreciate the voice actors even more. Most of the main voice cast records their lines together in the same studio, which is actually unusual for animated shows. Many animated series record each actor separately for scheduling convenience. But Family Guy's ensemble cast has developed such strong chemistry that they actually improvise and play off each other during recording sessions. These improvisation sessions have led to some of the show's most memorable moments. Jokes that weren't in the original script, character interactions that reveal new personality traits, and entire comedic sequences that grew out of the actors just goofing around in the studio. The writers have learned to leave space in their scripts for this kind of spontaneous creativity. The show's relationship with current events is another fascinating aspect of its production. Episodes are produced so far in advance that writers have to predict what will be culturally relevant 8 to 9 months in the future. They've developed an almost supernatural ability to anticipate which celebrities will still be famous, which political issues will still matter, and which pop culture references will still be funny by the time episodes air. Sometimes they get it spectacularly wrong, leading to episodes that reference celebrities who've completely disappeared from public consciousness, or make jokes about events that ended up being resolved in completely different ways. These temporal mismatches have become part of the show's charm, creating accidental time capsules of what people were thinking about during specific periods. Here's something about the show's merchandise empire that might occupy your thoughts as you drift off. Family Guy generates hundreds of millions of dollars in merchandise sales annually, from t-shirts and mugs to video games and Halloween costumes. The licensing department has to approve thousands of product designs, ensuring that everything maintains the show's comedic voice while being commercially viable. The most successful merchandise items are often the most random ones. Stewie's football head design became a best-selling plush toy, Brian's martini glass became a popular bar accessory. Peter's chicken fight with Ernie became an entire line of action figures. These products have introduced the show to audiences who might never watch it on television. As we wind down our journey through the bizarre world of Family Guy facts, here's one last thing to ponder as you close your eyes. The show has fundamentally changed how we consume comedy. It's trained an entire generation of viewers to expect rapid-fire jokes, constant pop culture references, and narrative structures that can pivot in completely unexpected directions at any moment. This influence extends far beyond television. You can see Family Guy's impact in internet memes, social media humor, and even in how people tell stories in everyday conversation. The show's cutaway gag structure has become a template for how we process and share information in the digital age. Those random tangents and seemingly unrelated references, they're everywhere now, from Twitter threads to TikTok videos. The show created a new language of comedy that's become so pervasive we barely notice it anymore. When someone starts telling a story, then suddenly pivots to a completely unrelated memory that somehow connects back to the original point, they're unconsciously using a Family Guy narrative structure. When someone makes a reference to an obscure piece of pop culture from decades ago to explain something happening today, they're speaking fluent Family Guy. So there you have it. As you drift off to sleep tonight, you can rest easy, knowing that somewhere in the world, animators are drawing thousands of individual frames to bring new episodes to life. Voice actors are improvising lines that will make millions of people laugh, and writers are crafting jokes that will still be quoted years from now. The strange, wonderful, chaotic world of Family Guy continues to evolve, one random cutaway gag at a time. Sweet dreams. And remember, if you find yourself having weird dreams about talking dogs, evil babies, or inexplicably long Conway Twitty performances, you'll know exactly where those images came from. The show that changed comedy forever has probably infiltrated your subconscious too, joining the ranks of viewers who've been shaped by its unique brand of organized chaos. You know that feeling when you're trying to fall asleep but your brain just won't shut up? Well, tonight we're gonna fix that with some of the most random, weirdly fascinating Family Guy facts that'll have you drifting off to dreamland while learning bizarre trivia about America's most chaotic animated family. So get comfortable, dim those lights, and let me take you on a gentle journey through the strange world of Quahog. Let's start with something that might surprise you. The show's creator Seth MacFarlane almost missed his flight on September 11, 2001. He was supposed to be on American Airlines Flight 11, one of the planes that hit the World Trade Center. But he arrived at the airport just 10 minutes late and missed the boarding. Sometimes, being late really does save your life. This near-miss experience actually influenced some of the show's later episodes, though MacFarlane rarely talks about it publicly. Speaking of Seth MacFarlane, did you know he voices 4 of the main characters? Peter, Brian, Stewie, and Glenn Quagmire are all brought to life by the same person. That's pretty impressive when you think about how different each character sounds. MacFarlane developed Peter's voice by imitating a security guard he knew, while Brian's sophisticated tone was inspired by old Hollywood actors. Stewie's accent, meanwhile, was based on Rex Harrison's performance in My Fair Lady. Here's something that might help you sleep better, knowing it exists. There's an entire episode that was banned from television for years. The episode, called Partial Terms of Endearment, dealt with some pretty controversial topics and wasn't aired on Fox until much later. It eventually found its way to DVD releases, but for the longest time, fans had no idea this episode even existed. Sometimes, the most interesting content is the stuff we never get to see. Family Guy has this weird relationship with cancellation that's almost like a bedtime story in itself. The show was canceled, not once, but twice. First in 2002, then again in 2003. But here's where it gets interesting. DVD sales and reruns on Adult Swim were so successful that Fox brought it back in 2005. It's like the show kept falling asleep and waking up stronger each time. The fans literally saved it through their dedication, which is pretty heartwarming when you think about it. Let me tell you about some of the guest stars who've appeared on the show that you might not have realized. Patrick Stewart, the distinguished Captain Picard himself, has voiced multiple characters including Susie's arch-nemesis. Rush Limbaugh appeared as himself, and even Phyllis Diller lent her voice to Peter's mother-in-law. The show has attracted everyone from political figures to rock stars, creating this weird mix of high culture and lowbrow humor. There's something oddly soothing about the show's animation process, too. Each episode takes about 8 months to complete from script to screen. The writers spend weeks crafting jokes, the voice actors record their lines multiple times to get the perfect delivery, and then teams of animators bring everything to life frame by frame. It's like watching a very slow, very detailed dream come together. The famous chicken fights between Peter and Ernie the Giant Chicken started as a throwaway gag, but became one of the show's most beloved running jokes. These elaborate, destruction-filled battles were inspired by old action movies and Jackie Chan films. The animators love creating these sequences because they get to go completely over the top with the destruction and mayhem. There's something almost meditative about watching these absurdly long fight scenes unfold. Here's a fact that connects to real life in an unexpected way. The character of Mayor Adam West was named after the actor who played Batman in the 1960 Seconds TV series. When the real Adam West heard about this, he was so delighted that he agreed to voice the character himself. He continued playing the role until his death in 2017, bringing his own quirky charm to the already eccentric animated mayor of Quahog. The show's musical numbers are surprisingly complex productions. When they create songs like Surfin' Bird or any of their elaborate Broadway-style numbers, they work with professional musicians and composers. Seth MacFarlane, being a trained singer himself, often performs these songs live in recording sessions. The musical episodes require months of additional work, but they've become some of the most memorable moments in the series. Cleveland's spin-off show, The Cleveland Show, ran for 4 seasons and had its own unique animation style that was slightly more polished than the original Family Guy. When Cleveland returned to Family Guy, the animators had to readjust his character design to match the original show's style. It's like he went away, got a makeover, and had to tone it down when he came back home. The show's pop culture references are researched extensively by a team of writers who specialize in different decades and cultural phenomena. They maintain databases of movie quotes, TV show references, and historical events to ensure their parodies are accurate enough to be funny, but absurd enough to avoid copyright issues. Sometimes they spend weeks perfecting a single throwaway reference that appears for just a few seconds. Stewie's sexuality has been a running mystery throughout the series, with writers deliberately keeping it ambiguous. Seth MacFarlane has mentioned in interviews that Stewie's character is meant to be fluid and open to interpretation. This ambiguity has led to countless fan theories and discussions, making Stewie one of the most analyzed characters in animated television. The Griffin house interior has been redesigned multiple times throughout the series, but the exterior has remained remarkably consistent. The house is supposedly located on Spooner Street in Quahog, Rhode Island, and the address is 31 Spooner Street. Fans have actually tried to locate this address in real Rhode Island towns, though of course it doesn't exist. Voice actress Alex Borstein, who plays Lois, originally auditioned for a completely different role. She was supposed to voice a minor character, but when they heard her natural speaking voice, they immediately knew she was perfect for Lois. Borstein has mentioned that she sometimes forgets to use Lois's voice in real life and accidentally slips into character during casual conversations. The show's writer's room operates like a comedy laboratory, where jokes are tested, refined, and sometimes completely scrapped. They have a policy where any writer can suggest changes to any joke, no matter how senior or junior they are. This collaborative approach has led to some of the show's most unexpected and brilliant moments, but it also means that some episodes go through dozens of script revisions. Brian's character was almost completely different in the original concept. He was supposed to be a regular dog who couldn't talk, but MacFarlane decided that having an intellectual talking dog would create better story opportunities. This decision fundamentally changed the show's dynamic and gave them a character who could serve as both comic relief and philosophical commentary. The infamous Conway Twitty segments, where the show would cut to footage of the real country singer performing entire songs, were actually created as time fillers when episodes ran short. These segments became so popular with fans that the writers started including them intentionally, turning what was essentially animated dead air into a beloved recurring gag. Quagmire's character was inspired by radio DJs from the 1950 seconds and 1960 seconds who had that smooth, slightly sleazy on-air personality. Seth MacFarlane studied old radio shows and interviews to develop Quagmire's distinctive speaking style and his catchphrase, "giggity giggity." The character's appearance was based on classic cartoon characters, but with a modern twist that made him both nostalgic and contemporary. The show's relationship with censorship is fascinating. The writers often create jokes specifically designed to test the boundaries of what they can get away with on television. They'll write multiple versions of controversial scenes, knowing that some will be cut but hoping that the milder versions will make it to air. It's like an ongoing negotiation with the censors through comedy. Family Guy was one of the first animated shows to embrace internet culture and memes before most people knew what memes were. The writers were early adopters of online humor and would incorporate internet jokes into episodes months before they became mainstream. This forward-thinking approach helped keep the show relevant to younger audiences who were spending more time online. The character of Herbert the Pervert was originally supposed to appear in just one episode, but his distinctive voice and creepy personality made him an unexpected fan favorite. The voice actor Alex Borstein came up with Herbert's characteristic whistle and speech pattern on the spot during recording, and it became such an integral part of the character that they couldn't imagine him any other way. Did you know that several Family Guy episodes have been turned into actual comic books? These comics expand on storylines from the show and sometimes feature adventures that would be too expensive to animate. The comic book format allows the writers to explore more complex storylines and include visual gags that might not work as well in animation. The show's approach to celebrity deaths is uniquely irreverent. When famous people pass away, the writers often create memorial segments that are simultaneously respectful and absurd. They've developed a reputation for handling these situations with a mix of genuine tribute and satirical commentary that somehow works better than it should. Joe Swanson's character was created specifically to address representation of disabled characters in animation, but the writers were careful not to make his disability the only thing that defines him. They wanted to show that wheelchair users could be action heroes, fathers, and complex characters with their own storylines and personality quirks that had nothing to do with their physical limitations. The show's animation studio has created detailed model sheets for background characters who appear for just a few seconds. They believe that consistency in character design, even for minor roles, helps create a more believable world. Some of these background characters have their own names and backstories that never make it into episodes but help the animators understand their roles in Quahog's community. Family Guy's impact on internet culture extends beyond just memes and references. The show pioneered the use of cutaway gags, which became a template for online content creators who needed to create short, punchy comedy segments. Many YouTube comedians cite Family Guy's editing style as an influence on their own work. The series has been translated into dozens of languages, and each version faces unique challenges in adapting American cultural references for international audiences. In some countries, entire storylines have been changed to make them more culturally relevant, while maintaining the show's essential humor and character dynamics. As you drift off to sleep tonight, remember that Family Guy represents something uniquely American about comedy, the ability to find humor in absolutely everything, from the mundane details of suburban life to the biggest questions about existence and meaning. The show's creators understood that laughter can be found anywhere if you're willing to look for it, and sometimes the most random, unexpected moments become the ones we remember most fondly. Sweet dreams, and may your own family adventures be slightly less chaotic than the Griffin's.